My name is Marisol, and I am 32 years old. For the past decade, I have been a waitress at Sunrise Diners supporting my family, despite being the middle child between my successful lawyer sister and my struggling brother. When our father died, I secretly paid $72,000 to save our family home from foreclosure. Nobody acknowledged my sacrifice until that fateful dinner when my mother announced her decision. "Of course she got the house, she is not a waiter," my mom said, passing my sister the keys. If you are watching this, let me know where you are from in the comments section. Hit that like and subscribe button to see what happened after I stopped covering the taxes that night. I grew up in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, in a house my father James built with his own hands. He was a construction worker who poured his heart and soul into creating a safe haven for our family. The two-story blue house with white trim stood as a testament to his dedication and craftsmanship. Every creaking floorboard and slightly uneven doorframe told the story of a man who valued substance over appearance. My mother Diana was his opposite in many ways. Where Dad was practical and humble, Mom was obsessed with status and keeping up appearances. She came from a family that had once been wealthy, but had lost everything before she was born. This created in her a desperate desire to climb back up the social ladder and to push her children toward careers she deemed respectable. From an early age, it was clear that my older sister Sophia was the golden child. She excelled academically, joined all the right clubs, and eventually went to law school on a partial scholarship. Every accomplishment of hers was celebrated extravagantly, her graduation photos prominently displayed in the living room where visitors could not miss them. My mother never tired of telling neighbors and relatives about my daughter, the lawyer. Then there was my younger brother, Alex. 3 years my junior, he struggled to find his path. He bounced from major to major in community college before dropping out entirely. He tried various jobs but never seemed to stick with anything for more than a few months. Mom viewed him with a mixture of disappointment and worried indulgence, always making excuses for his lack of direction and drive. And in the middle, there was me. I was a decent student, not brilliant like Sophia, but certainly capable. I enjoyed school well enough, but what I truly loved was connecting with people. From my first job at 16 bussing tables at a local cafe, I knew I had found my calling in the hospitality industry. There was something deeply satisfying about creating positive experiences for people, about remembering regular customers' names and their usual orders, about being the bright spot in someone's otherwise difficult day. When I announced after high school that I wanted to pursue a career in food service rather than going to college, my parents were devastated. Dad tried to hide his disappointment, suggesting that perhaps I could study business or hospitality management instead, but Mom made no attempt to mask her horror. Waiting tables. That is not a real career, Marisol. That is what you do to pay for college, not instead of college. It became a constant refrain throughout my 20s. Every family gathering included subtle and not-so-subtle digs at my career choice, especially when contrasted with Sophia's progression through law school and into a prestigious firm specializing in corporate law. "Sophia just won her first big case," Mom would announce proudly before turning to me with a tight smile. "And how is the diner dear? Still serving the same old crowd?" What my mother failed to understand was that I genuinely loved my job. Over the years, I had worked my way up to becoming the head waitress at Sunrise Diner, a popular establishment known for its amazing breakfast food and warm atmosphere. I had regular customers who specifically asked to sit in my section. I knew their stories, their families, their struggles and triumphs. I was a confidant, a friendly face, sometimes even a surrogate family member to lonely elderly patrons who had no one else to talk to. And contrary to my mother's assumptions, I made good money. Between my hourly wage and the generous tips from appreciative customers, I earned enough to rent a small but comfortable apartment, drive a reliable car, and even put away substantial savings. I lived below my means, investing wisely based on advice from some of my regular customers who worked in finance. By my 30th birthday, I had amassed a savings account that would have shocked my status-conscious mother had she known about it. Everything changed 5 years ago when Dad suffered a sudden heart attack. He collapsed while working on a construction site and was gone before the ambulance even arrived. Our family was devastated. Dad had been the steady presence, the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over Mom's sharp edges and made her more tolerable to be around. Without him, the dynamics shifted dramatically. In the aftermath of his death, we discovered something shocking. Despite his practical nature, Dad had been hiding serious financial problems from all of us. The economic downturn had hit the construction industry hard, and he had been working fewer hours in the years before his death. Rather than worry Mom or admit that they needed to cut back on expenses, he had been quietly falling behind on the mortgage and property taxes for the house he had built with such pride. The revelation came in the form of foreclosure notices and tax delinquency letters that arrived within weeks of his funeral. Mom fell apart, alternating between sobbing uncontrollably and angrily blaming Dad for keeping secrets. The thought of losing the family home, the physical manifestation of Dad's love for us, was unbearable to all of us, but especially to Mom. "Your father built this house for us to live in forever," she wailed one evening. "How could he have been so irresponsible? What will the neighbors think if we have to sell or worse face foreclosure?" Sophia tried to help with advice, reviewing the financial documents and explaining our options. But despite her impressive job title, she was struggling under the weight of massive student loans and the expenses associated with maintaining the lifestyle expected at her firm. She could offer legal insights, but very little in terms of actual financial assistance. Alex was utterly useless in the crisis. He expressed appropriate sadness, but quickly retreated to his apartment in the city, claiming that dealing with estates and finances was not his thing. In reality, he had his own financial issues, frequently borrowing money from Mom, even after Dad's death. That left me. Without telling anyone, I began to investigate exactly what it would take to save our family home. The numbers were staggering. There was $28,000 in back taxes, owed another $15,000 needed to bring the mortgage current, and additional funds required for essential repairs that Dad had been putting off. All told, it would take over $70,000 to secure the house and make it livable for the long term. It was an enormous sum, but I had the means to help even if no one in my family would have believed it. The decision to save our family home was not one I made lightly. I had been saving for years with the dream of eventually opening my own diner. Those funds represented countless double shifts, holidays worked while others celebrated, and frugal living that sometimes bordered on extreme. But in the end, family won out over personal ambition. Dad would have done anything to protect that house, and by extension, Mom. I felt I owed it to his memory to do the same. I began quietly, without fanfare or announcement. First, I paid the most pressing debt, a $16,000 property tax bill that was about to trigger a tax sale of the property. The payment was made electronically from my account directly to the county treasurer's office, listed simply as "Payment on behalf of Diana Ramirez." I kept the confirmation email but said nothing to my family. Next came the mortgage. I approached the bank and negotiated a payment plan for the arrears, making a substantial initial payment of $15,000 to show good faith. The loan officer was surprisingly sympathetic once I explained the situation. "Your father was a good man," he told me. "I remember when he first applied for this construction loan. He was so proud to be building a home for his family. We can work with you to keep it in the family." Over the next 3 years, I systematically addressed every financial issue threatening the house. When the roof began leaking, I paid $6,000 for repairs rather than letting Mom try to patch it with cheap fixes. When the aging furnace finally gave out during a particularly brutal Chicago winter, I covered the $8,000 replacement cost. Property taxes, insurance, unexpected repairs. I handled them all while maintaining the fiction that these problems were being resolved through payment plans, insurance claims, or mysterious bureaucratic forgiveness. Mom never questioned how these financial miracles were occurring. She was too relieved to maintain her home and her dignity in the neighborhood. Sophia was busy climbing the corporate ladder and battling her own financial demons to look too closely at the family finances. And Alex was perpetually self-absorbed, noticing little beyond his immediate needs. Throughout this time, my resentment grew like a slow-burning fire. It wasn't the money itself that bothered me, though. $72,000 was certainly a significant sacrifice. It was the continued dismissal of my contributions to the family, the persistent belittling of my career choice, the way Mom continued to hold up Sophia as the family success story while treating me as someone who had settled for less than I could have been. "Did you hear Sophia just got promoted again?" Mom would say during our Sunday dinners, which I still faithfully attended despite working brunch shifts that morning. Junior partner at only 34, they even gave her a corner office. The comments about my job became more frequent and more pointed after Dad's death, as if his absence had removed any filter on Mom's disappointment in my life choices. "The Petersons' son just graduated from medical school," she would mention casually while I helped her with the dishes. "Remember you two went to prom together? Imagine if you had stayed together, you could have been a doctor's wife instead of serving pancakes all day." Each dig, Each dismissive comment, each comparison to Sophia or someone else's more successful child added to the growing weight of my unacknowledged sacrifices. I began to withdraw emotionally, still performing my duties as the supportive daughter, but building walls around my heart to protect it from further damage. The strain began to show in other areas of my life as well. I turned down promotions at work that would have required more responsibility but less customer interaction, knowing that direct tips were funding my family obligations. I postponed dating, unable to honestly share my financial situation with potential partners without revealing the extent of my family's dysfunction. I existed in a strange limbo, financially supporting a household that did not truly value me. By the third year of this arrangement, I had contributed exactly $72,000 to saving and maintaining the family home. I kept meticulous records partly out of my natural tendency toward organization, but also from some inner voice that warned me I might one day need to prove what I had done. Every bank transfer, every receipt, every confirmation email was carefully saved in both digital and physical form, tucked away in a folder labeled simply House. I sometimes wondered what Dad would think of the situation. Would he be proud of me for stepping up to save the home he built? Or would he be disappointed that I was enabling Mom's continued disrespect? These questions haunted me as I wrote each check and made each transfer the numbers in my own savings account steadily decreasing, while my family remained blissfully unaware of my sacrifice. The emotional toll was perhaps even greater than the financial one. There is a special kind of pain in giving so much and having it go completely unrecognized in watching someone else receive credit and admiration for problems you secretly solved. I began to feel invisible in my own family, a ghost who haunted the periphery of their lives, essential but unseen. Something had to give eventually. No one can sustain that level of giving without reciprocity indefinitely. The human heart has limits to what it can endure, and mine was rapidly approaching its breaking point. All it would take was one more slight, one more dismissal, one more moment of being taken for granted to shatter the fragile equilibrium I had been maintaining. That breaking point arrived on an unseasonably warm April evening at a family dinner that would forever change the course of our relationships. The invitation came via text message, my mother's preferred method of communication, despite her complaints about young people always on their phones. The message was brief but intriguing. Special family dinner this Sunday at 5. Important announcement. Everyone must attend. I immediately requested the evening off work, something I rarely did for family functions. Usually I would attend gatherings after my shift ended, arriving tired but present. This time, however, the phrase important announcement sparked something in me, a flicker of hope that perhaps finally my contributions might be acknowledged. The days leading up to the dinner were filled with speculation. Had Sophia received another promotion? Was Alex finally settling into a stable job? Was Mom selling the house after all? This last possibility sent me into a panic. What had happened to all the money I had poured into saving the property? I calmed myself with the knowledge that any sale would at least return my investment through the proceeds, though the thought of losing Dad's legacy was painful. I decided to make the dinner special, regardless of the announcement. I spent Saturday shopping for ingredients for Dad's favorite meal beef bourguignon, with crusty bread and a decadent chocolate cake for dessert. It was a challenging menu that would require hours of preparation, but cooking had become my therapy, a way to honor Dad's memory and express love I often couldn't put into words. Sunday arrived, and I spent the morning and afternoon in my small apartment kitchen, carefully preparing each element of the meal. The beef was tender, the sauce rich and flavorful, the vegetables perfectly cooked. The cake rose beautifully, and the ganache had just the right sheen. I packed everything carefully in insulated containers and drove to the family home, arriving an hour early to reheat and arrange the food. Mom seemed surprised, but pleased by my culinary efforts. "This looks lovely, Marisol, almost professional." The backhanded compliment stung, but I let it go, focusing instead on the final preparations. Sophia arrived next, looking immaculate as always in a tailored pantsuit despite it being Sunday. She brought an expensive bottle of wine, and air kissed everyone's cheeks before settling at the table with her phone still answering work emails. Alex was last 20 minutes late and slightly disheveled, muttering excuses about traffic that no one really believed. He did, however, compliment the food, enthusiastically helping himself to a large serving before anyone else had even sat down. Once we were all seated and served, Mom tapped her glass with a spoon, calling for our attention. She was wearing her good pearls and had styled her hair, clear signs that whatever announcement was coming, she considered it momentous. "I have been doing a lot of thinking since your father passed," she began, her voice solemn, but with an undercurrent of excitement I couldn't quite place, "about the future of this family and this home that meant so much to him." My heart began to race. Was this finally the moment when my sacrifices would be acknowledged? Had Mom somehow discovered my financial contributions and planned this dinner to thank me publicly? "As you know," she continued, "I have managed to keep this house despite the financial difficulties after your father's death. It hasn't been easy, but with Sophia's excellent legal advice about negotiating with the bank, we've made it work." I nearly choked on my wine. Sophia's legal advice. The same advice that had amounted to try asking for an extension while I wrote checks totaling tens of thousands of dollars. I glanced at my sister, who was nodding modestly, as if accepting credit for saving the house. She had no idea about my involvement, I reminded myself. This was Mom's narrative, not hers. "The house is now fully secured," Mom announced proudly. "All debts paid, all issues resolved, and I have made an important decision about its future." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. From it, she produced a set of keys tied with a red ribbon. My old house keys. Why was she being so ceremonial about this? "Sophia has some wonderful news," Mom said, beaming at my sister. "Tell them, dear." Sophia straightened in her chair, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm expecting Brian and I are having a baby in October." "My first grandchild," Mom exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "Isn't it wonderful?" Under normal circumstances, I would have been thrilled for my sister. Despite our differences, I didn't resent her personally for Mom's favoritism, but something in the air, the keys in Mom's hand, gave me a sinking feeling that this dinner was heading somewhere painful for me. "And that brings me to my decision," Mom continued. "I have decided to sign over the house to Sophia and Brian. They'll need the space for the baby, and it's in a wonderful school district for when the little one is older." The room began to spin slightly as the implications hit me. The house that I had sacrificed my own dreams to save was being given away without my knowledge or consent. Not sold with proceeds to be shared, but simply handed over like a birthday gift. "I've already spoken with my lawyer and the paperwork is drawn up." Mom went on, oblivious to my distress. "We can all still gather here for holidays and family events, of course. It will stay in the family just as your father would have wanted." She held out the keys to Sophia, who looked surprised but pleased by this unexpected windfall. "Of course she got the house. She's not a waiter," my mom said, passing my sister the keys. "She needs a proper home to raise my grandchild, and she's established herself in a real profession worthy of your father's legacy." The room fell silent. Alex stopped eating his fork suspended halfway to his mouth as he glanced between Mom and me. Sophia's expression froze, her hand still outstretched toward the keys, suddenly aware that something significant and terrible was happening. I felt a strange calm descend over me, the kind that comes when a situation is so outrageous that ordinary emotional responses seem inadequate. Years of suppressed anger, hurt, and resentment crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity. Without raising my voice or showing any outward sign of the turmoil within, I replied, "Then let her pay the $72,000 I used to save it." The silence that followed my statement was absolute. It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked from the room, leaving us suspended in a vacuum where sound could not travel. Mom's hand, still extended with the keys, began to tremble slightly. Sophia slowly withdrew her own hand, her expression shifting from shocked to confused to concerned in rapid succession. Alex put down his fork deliberately, suddenly finding the pattern on his plate fascinating. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a folder, the one labeled House, that contained every record of my financial contributions to saving our family home. With deliberate calmness that belied the storm within me, I placed it on the table and opened it, revealing neatly organized bank statements, receipts, and transfer confirmations. $16,000 to prevent the tax sale in 2020, I said, sliding the first document toward the center of the table. $15,000 to bring the mortgage current the same year. Another document joined the first. $6,000 for the roof repairs in 2021. $8,000 for the new furnace that winter. Property taxes for 3 years, running insurance premiums, the plumbing emergency last spring, the electrical update required by the city code enforcement. With each item I listed, I added another piece of evidence to the growing pile. The receipts formed a paper trail of my sacrifice, a physical manifestation of the years I had spent quietly supporting a household that had never supported me. Every penny documented, every payment made from my account, $72,000 total over 3 years, money I had saved to open my own restaurant someday. Mom's face had drained of color. But the payment plans, the extensions, the insurance claims. There were no payment plans, I said quietly. No extensions. The few insurance claims covered only a fraction of the actual costs. I paid the difference, every time. Why didn't you tell us? Sophia asked, her lawyer's mind already calculating the legal implications of this revelation. Would it have mattered? I asked, looking directly at her. When have any of you ever valued what I contribute? Mom has spent the last decade reminding me that waiting tables isn't a real job, that I've wasted my potential, that I should be more like you. I turned to my mother, whose shock was giving way to indignation. I did try to tell you many times. Remember when the new furnace was installed and I mentioned that I took care of it? You assumed that meant I had found a payment plan. When I paid the property taxes and showed you the zero balance statement, you said, "Thank goodness they accepted our hardship application, even though we never filed one." You should have been more clear, Mom protested weakly. How was I supposed to know? You weren't supposed to know, I admitted. I never expected recognition or thanks. I did it because Dad loved this house and because I love this family despite everything. But I never agreed to have my investment handed over to Sophia without my knowledge or consent. Sophia, ever the pragmatist, tried to take control of the situation. This can be worked out. If Marisol has truly contributed this amount, we can discuss fair compensation or perhaps a partial ownership arrangement. Fair compensation, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. Like the fair compensation I get when you all diminish my career. The respect I receive when Mom introduces me as my other daughter, she's just a waitress. You're overreacting, Mom snapped, finding her voice at last. This house has been in the family for 30 years. Your father built it for all of us. And I saved it for all of us, I countered, not just for Sophia and her future children. Alex, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. She's right, Mom. It's not fair to give the house to Sophia without considering what Marisol has done. I had no idea you were carrying this burden alone, he added, looking at me with new respect in his eyes. Mom's expression hardened her momentary discomfort, giving way to the stubborn pride that had defined her for as long as I could remember. What's done is done. The paperwork is being processed. Sophia needs this house more than you do. You don't even have a family. Those words, so casually cruel, severed something vital within me. The last thread of obligation, of familial duty that had bound me to this toxic dynamic, snapped cleanly and irrevocably. I gathered my documents with steady hands and returned them to my folder. Then, as of tonight, I am no longer covering the property taxes. They're due next month, $14,000. I'm sure Sophia's prestigious job can handle that, along with the insurance maintenance and all the other costs that come with this house. I stood up, tucking the folder securely under my arm. And for the record, I do have a family. They're the people who value me for who I am, not what I do for a living or what I can give them. Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the dining room, through the entryway, and out the front door of the house my father had built and I had saved. The spring evening air felt cleansing on my face as I made my way to my car, my steps lighter than they had been in years, despite the heaviness in my heart. As I drove away, I realized I wasn't sad. I was angry, yes, and disappointed, but underlying those emotions was a sense of liberation so profound it was almost dizzying. For the first time in 3 years, the future stretched before me, unmarred by the weight of family obligation. My savings would begin to accumulate again. My dream of owning my own restaurant could be resurrected. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, the city lights blurring through unshed tears. Eventually, I found myself parking outside a small cafe owned by my best friend Taylor. Despite the late-hour light still shone through the windows as she prepared for the next day. She looked up as I entered, one look at my face telling her everything she needed to know. "Family dinner went nuclear, huh?" she asked, already reaching for 2 glasses and a bottle of wine she kept for emergencies. And so at a small table in an empty cafe, I told Taylor everything. The financial sacrifices, the dismissal of my career, the final insult of giving away the house I had saved. She listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly outraged on my behalf. "You need to document this formally," she said when I had finished. "Not just for yourself, but for them. They need to understand exactly what you've done and what it means now that you're stepping back." "I have all the documentation," I assured her, patting my folder. "No, I mean legally. See a lawyer tomorrow. Have them draft an official notice. Make it real in a way they can't ignore or reinterpret later." As the night wore on and the wine bottle emptied, a plan began to take shape. Not a plan for revenge or retribution, but for protection and clarification. For the first time in my adult life, I would put myself first, establish clear boundaries, and demand the respect I deserved, starting with an official accounting of what was owed to me both financially and emotionally. The weekend stretched before me like an unfamiliar landscape. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to solve a family crisis or provide unacknowledged support. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages and missed calls from Mom and Sophia, but I silenced it without reading them. Alex sent a single text that simply read, "I'm sorry, you deserved better." I appreciated his acknowledgement, but wasn't ready to respond even to him. Saturday morning found me in the office of Patricia Winters, a family law attorney recommended by one of my regular customers at the diner. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who listened to my story without visible judgment before asking pointed practical questions about my documentation. "You've kept exceptional records," she noted, reviewing my folder with professional approval. "Most people in your situation would have far less to work with." "I've always been organized," I explained, "and something told me I might need proof someday." "Your instincts were correct," she replied, closing the folder. "Based on what you've shown me, you have several options. We could file a lien against the property for the amount you've contributed, which would need to be satisfied if the house is ever sold or refinanced. We could demand immediate repayment under threat of legal action, or we could negotiate a repayment plan that acknowledges your contribution while allowing your family some flexibility." "I don't want to punish them," I said after some consideration. "I just want what's fair. And more importantly, I want them to recognize what I've done instead of dismissing it." Patricia nodded understandingly. "Then I suggest we draft a formal notice outlining your contributions with supporting documentation. We'll make clear that you expect either repayment or formal acknowledgement of your partial ownership of the property. We'll set a reasonable time frame for response before any legal action would commence." "That sounds perfect," I agreed. We spent the next hour crafting the letter, striking a tone that was firm but not vindictive. The final document acknowledged my mother's right to transfer the property, but asserted my right to compensation for my substantial financial investment in it. It requested a response within 14 days and outlined potential next steps if no satisfactory arrangement could be reached. "Would you like me to send this via certified mail, or would you prefer to deliver it yourself?" Patricia asked, as her assistant made copies of all my documentation. "Certified mail," I replied without hesitation. "I need some distance right now." With the letter finalized and arrangements made for its delivery on Monday morning, I felt a burden lift from my shoulders. The situation wasn't resolved, but I had taken concrete steps toward protecting myself and making my position clear. Whatever happened next would happen on my terms, not my family's. The remainder of the weekend was strangely peaceful. I took long walks through my neighborhood, noting the first spring flowers pushing through the soil. I treated myself to a nice meal at a restaurant I had always wanted to try, but had considered too expensive given my family obligations. I even called an old friend I had lost touch with and made plans to reconnect. By Sunday evening, my phone had fallen silent. Perhaps my family had realized I needed space, or perhaps they were regrouping for their next approach. Either way, I welcomed the quiet as I prepared for my Monday morning shift at the diner. I slept better that night than I had in years, my dreams untroubled by financial worries or family tensions. Whatever storm was coming, I would face it standing firmly in my truth. Monday dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring day. I arrived at Sunrise Diner for my usual opening shift, greeting the cook and busboys with my customary warmth, but perhaps a bit more genuine cheer than usual. My regular customers noticed the difference, with several commenting that I seemed lighter somehow. "Just making some positive changes in my life," I replied with a smile, refilling coffee cups and taking orders with practiced efficiency. Midway through my shift, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from my mother. "The certified letter arrived. We need to talk. Come to the house after your shift." No, please, no acknowledgement of my feelings, just the same imperious tone she had always used when summoning her children. I texted back a simple response. I'm not comfortable meeting at the house. I can meet tomorrow at 6 p.m. at Taylor's Cafe after it closes. Neutral territory with a friend nearby for support if needed. The response was immediate and predictable. This is family business. We should discuss it at home. Taylor's Cafe or not at all, I replied, then silenced my phone and returned to work. By the end of my shift, I had 3 more messages from Mom, each more insistent than the last, and one from Sophia suggesting we approach this rationally and without emotion. I had to laugh at that one. My sister, the lawyer, always believing that human relationships could be negotiated like business contracts. I responded only to Sophia's message, "I am being rational. That's why I documented everything and consulted a lawyer. See you tomorrow at 6. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of normal activities that felt strangely significant. I went grocery shopping, did laundry, and paid bills, everyday tasks that reminded me that life continued despite family drama. When I checked my bank account to pay my rent, I allowed myself a moment to imagine how much more would be there if I hadn't been supporting a household that didn't appreciate me. The thought was both bitter and sweet, a reminder of what I had sacrificed, but also of what I could now rebuild. As I prepared for bed, I felt a momentary wave of doubt. Was I being too harsh, too unforgiving? But then I remembered my mother's casual cruelty. Of course she got the house, she's not a waiter. 3 years of sacrifice dismissed in a single contemptuous sentence. My resolve hardened once more. Tomorrow's meeting would be difficult but necessary. Whatever happened next would change my family forever, for better or worse. And for once, I would be an active participant in that change, not just its unwitting financier. Taylor's Cafe looked different after hours, the cheerful bustle of customers replaced by empty chairs stacked on tables and the gentle hum of refrigerators. Taylor herself had insisted on positioning herself behind the counter with paperwork as a pretense close enough to intervene if needed, but giving me space to handle my family confrontation. They arrived as a unit, Mom leading the way with Sophia and Alex trailing behind. Mom looked tired, the carefully maintained facade of the neighborhood matriarch showing cracks around her eyes and mouth. Sophia was in full lawyer mode, carrying a leather portfolio and dressed in what I recognized as her courtroom outfit. Alex hung back slightly, his expression unreadable, but his body language suggesting discomfort. "This is hardly an appropriate venue for a private family discussion," Mom began as they approached my table. "It's neutral ground," I replied calmly. "Please sit down." They arranged themselves across from me, creating an unintentional tableau of opposition. Family versus Marisol, a visual representation of how I had felt for years. "We received your letter," Sophia began, taking charge of the conversation. "While we acknowledge that you made certain contributions to the household, the timing and manner of your disclosure is concerning." "Concerning to whom?" I asked. "To Mom, who gave away a house I saved without consulting me, or to you who accepted it without asking questions?" "You should have told us you were paying these bills," Mom interjected. "How were we supposed to know?" "I did tell you," I countered, "multiple times. You chose not to hear me or to reinterpret what I said to fit your narrative, just like you've chosen not to hear me when I talk about my career or my life goals." "This isn't about your job," Mom said dismissively. "This is about you suddenly claiming ownership of family property." "I'm not claiming ownership of family property," I clarified. "I'm stating that I invested $72,000 in a property that you unilaterally decided to give away. Money that represented my dreams and my future security." "We can work out a payment plan," Sophia offered, opening her portfolio to reveal spreadsheets and calculations. Always the problem solver, my sister. Given that these payments were made over several years, we could structure repayment over a similar time frame. "That's not the point," I said, frustration creeping into my voice despite my best efforts. "The point is that none of you valued my contributions then, and you're only acknowledging them now because I've forced the issue." "What do you want, Marisol?" Alex spoke for the first time. "Really, what's your ideal outcome here?" His question caught me off guard. What did I want? Financial restitution, certainly, but there was something deeper, something more fundamental that money couldn't address. "I want recognition," I said finally. "Not just of the money I contributed, but of who I am. I want to be valued as a member of this family, regardless of my career choice or life path. I want to stop being the invisible middle child who gives and gives while being constantly diminished." Mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "We've never diminished you." "Really?" I laughed incredulously. "She's not a waiter." Those were your exact words, Mom. As if my job makes me less deserving, less important, less worthy of consideration. A heavy silence fell over the table. Sophia looked at her carefully prepared financial documents, suddenly seeming to realize they weren't addressing the real issue. Alex studied his hands. Mom stared out the window, her profile rigid with decades of ingrained prejudices and expectations. "I never respected your choice," Mom said finally, still not looking at me. "I wanted more for you than waiting tables. I thought if I kept pushing, you'd eventually go back to school, find a better career." "But I love my job," I said softly. "I'm good at it. It brings me joy and allows me to connect with people in meaningful ways. And contrary to what you believe, it's provided me with financial stability and opportunities." "I didn't know," Sophia interjected, "about the money, about how you felt. Mom always made it sound like the house was being saved through her careful management and my legal advice. If I had known you were covering the costs, would it have changed anything?" I asked her directly. "Would you have declined the house if you'd known?" Sophia had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I don't know," she admitted. "Brian and I have been saving for a house, but with the baby coming and the market being what it is—" "Your father always intended for the house to stay in the family," Mom insisted, finding solid ground in Dad's memory. "He would have wanted it to go to the child who could best maintain it and pass it on to the next generation." The statement hung in the air, its implications clear. Not to the waitress daughter who might never marry or have children, not to the son who couldn't hold down a job, to the successful lawyer with the appropriate spouse and impending grandchild. Dad's legacy as interpreted through Mom's narrow lens of what constituted success and family continuity. "Dad wanted us to be happy and to support each other," I countered. "He never made me feel less than because of my career choice. That was all you, Mom." Another uncomfortable silence descended. Taylor caught my eye from behind the counter, silently asking if I needed her intervention. I shook my head slightly. This painful conversation needed to happen regardless of how difficult it was. "So what now?" Alex asked eventually. "Is this going to court or what?" "That depends on all of you," I replied. "I'm not looking to punish anyone. I just want what's fair, both financially and emotionally." "The house is already in the process of being transferred," Sophia pointed out. "Legally speaking, that transaction would be difficult to undo." "I'm not asking for it to be undone," I clarified. "I'm asking for my investment to be acknowledged and repaid, and more importantly, for my place in this family to be respected going forward." "We can repay you," Sophia said after a moment's calculation. "It will take time, but between my salary and Brian's we can manage it, perhaps with a formal agreement secured by the property itself." Mom looked stricken. "You're going to put a lien on the family home after everything your father and I sacrificed to build it, after everything I sacrificed to save it," I corrected her gently but firmly. "And yes, I think that's reasonable given the circumstances." The negotiations continued for nearly 2 hours. Legal terms were discussed, repayment schedules proposed, and rejected emotional grievances aired and acknowledged to varying degrees. Taylor quietly provided coffee as the evening wore on, her presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. By the end of the meeting, we had reached a tentative agreement. Sophia and Brian would repay my $72,000 over 5 years, with interest secured by a formal lien on the property. Mom would retain lifetime rights to live in the house, ensuring she wouldn't be displaced by her own decision. And perhaps most importantly, we agreed to family counseling to address the deeper issues that had led to this crisis. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Mom still clearly struggled to see my career as legitimate, making several comments about how I could use the repayment to go back to school. Sophia's lawyer instincts had her inserting clauses and conditions into what should have been a straightforward family agreement. And Alex remained largely on the sidelines, supportive but uninvolved in the practical aspects of the solution. But it was a start, a first step toward a more honest and equitable family dynamic. As we prepared to leave, I felt neither victorious nor defeated, just weary and cautiously hopeful that something better might emerge from the ashes of our old patterns. "Marisol," Mom said, as she put on her coat, her voice softer than it had been all evening, "I never meant to make you feel less than. I just wanted what I thought was best for you." "I know, Mom," I replied, surprising myself with the sincerity of my response. "But I'm the one who gets to decide what's best for me. That's what Dad always understood." She nodded, her eyes suspiciously bright in the dim cafe lighting. "He was always better at seeing who you really were, all of you." She hesitated, then added, "Maybe I could come by the diner sometime, see you in your element." It was a small concession, a tiny crack in the wall of her disapproval, but it felt monumental. "I'd like that," I said. "The blueberry pancakes are amazing on Thursdays." As they filed out into the night, Taylor locked the door behind them and turned to me with raised eyebrows. "Well, disaster or progress?" "Both, I think," I replied, collapsing into a chair with emotional exhaustion. "It's a start anyway." "To new beginnings," she said, producing 2 glasses and a bottle of champagne she'd apparently had chilling just in case. "And to standing up for yourself, finally." We toasted in the empty cafe, the first celebration of what would become a year of transformation, growth, and rediscovered dreams. 2 years can change everything or nothing at all, depending on how you use them. In my case, the 24 months following that fateful family dinner became a period of profound transformation, both personally and professionally. The repayment from Sophia began as agreed regular monthly deposits that gradually rebuilt my savings. I was tempered about how to use this money, taking my time to plan rather than rushing into decisions. The dream of owning my own restaurant hadn't faded, but it had evolved, becoming more defined and practical with each passing month. 6 months after our confrontation, I enrolled in weekend business classes at the local community college. Not because I felt my career needed legitimizing, as Mom might have once suggested, but because I wanted the skills to succeed as an entrepreneur. I studied accounting, small business management, and marketing while continuing to work full-time at Sunrise Diner. My boss, Frank, became an unexpected mentor when I shared my long-term goals with him. A 30-year veteran of the restaurant industry, he offered practical advice that no textbook could provide. "Location and concept, those are the killers for new restaurants," he told me one slow afternoon. "Get those wrong, and nothing else matters. Get them right, and you can overcome almost any other mistake." I spent weekends scouting potential locations, studying neighborhood demographics, and refining my concept. I wanted to create something that honored the traditional American diner while updating it for contemporary tastes and dietary needs. "Comfort food with conscience," I called it in my business plan. The relationship with my family evolved slowly, with setbacks and progress in equal measure. Mom did eventually visit the diner as promised, sitting uncomfortably at the counter and watching with barely concealed surprise as I managed the morning rush with skill and authority. She even complimented the coffee high praise from a woman who rarely acknowledged culinary success outside her own kitchen. Sophia gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, making me an aunt for the first time. Despite our complicated history, I found genuine joy in my niece Emma and made an effort to be present in her life. Sophia, for her part, seemed humbled by motherhood, the experience of caring for someone completely dependent on her, creating a new empathy that extended to our relationship. "I get it now," she admitted during one of my visits as Emma slept peacefully between us. "Why you love what you do, connecting with people, making their day better. It's not so different from what I'm doing with her." Alex surprised everyone by finally finding his passion in sustainable landscaping, his natural charm, and Dad's inherited handiness, combining to create a successful small business designing drought-resistant gardens for eco-conscious homeowners. He became an unexpected ally in my entrepreneurial journey, understanding the challenges of small business ownership from his own experience. Mom remained Mom progress, measured in small gestures rather than dramatic changes. She stopped introducing me as just a waitress, and occasionally asked genuine questions about my career. The family counseling sessions, while initially awkward, created space for conversations we had avoided for decades. Not all wounds healed completely, but they at least stopped festering in silence. And through it all, I kept working, saving, and planning for my dream. When a small storefront became available in a gentrifying neighborhood with high foot traffic but still reasonable rent, I knew it was time. My business plan was solid, my savings substantial, and my concept refined through countless hours of research and feedback. Marisol's Place opened its doors 18 months after I received the first repayment check from Sophia. The space was modest but welcoming, with comfortable booths, a gleaming counter, and an open kitchen where customers could watch their food being prepared. The menu offered traditional diner favorites alongside healthier options, locally sourced ingredients where possible, and accommodations for various dietary restrictions. Opening day was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Taylor and her staff came early to help with last-minute preparations. Alex brought fresh flowers for each table, and even Sophia took the morning off work to show support, bringing little Emma in her stroller. Mom arrived just before the doors opened, carrying a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "It was your father's," she said, handing it to me with uncharacteristic awkwardness. "I thought it should be here." Inside was Dad's old hammer, the one he had used to build our family home. Simple, worn, reliable. I placed it on a small shelf behind the counter, a reminder of where I came from and the values that had guided me here. The first customers arrived promptly at 7, many of them regulars from Sunrise Diner who had followed me to my new venture. They filled the booths and counter seats, ordered generously, and left generous tips with encouraging notes. By the end of that first day, exhausted but elated, I knew I had created something special. The months that followed were challenging but rewarding. I worked longer hours than I ever had as an employee, handling everything from cooking to bookkeeping to marketing. There were equipment breakdowns, staffing issues, and the 1,000 minor crises that come with any new business. But there were triumphs: 2 positive reviews in local publications, a growing base of loyal customers, and the deep satisfaction of building something that was entirely mine. 6 months after opening the business had stabilized enough for me to hire additional staff, giving me occasional days off and time to think about the future. I began dating again, cautiously at first, then with increasing confidence as I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer the person who silently accepted disrespect or devalued her own contributions. I had boundaries, expectations, and a sense of self-worth that transformed how I approached relationships. Mom's first visit to the restaurant as a regular customer rather than a family obligation marked a turning point in our relationship. She arrived with 2 friends from her neighborhood women who had known me since childhood and had undoubtedly heard her complaints about my career choice over the years. I seated them at my best table and served them myself professionally but warmly. "This is all yours," one of her friends asked, looking around the bustling space with obvious approval. "Diana, you never told us Marisol was such a successful businesswoman." The look on Mom's face was complicated, a mixture of surprise, pride, and perhaps a touch of shame for her past dismissals. "Yes," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "She's always been talented. I just didn't always see it clearly." It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement, and at this point in our journey, that was enough. Sophia began bringing clients to the restaurant for lunch meetings, her ultimate gesture of approval. "The food is excellent, the atmosphere is perfect for discussions without being too formal, and I get to support my sister," she explained when I asked about it. Win-win. The final payment from Sophia and Brian arrived on the 2nd anniversary of our confrontation. The check came with a card signed by both of them, acknowledging not just the financial debt, but the emotional one as well. "Thank you for teaching us about fairness, family, and standing up for your worth. Emma is lucky to have an aunt who models such strength." That evening, sitting in my office above the restaurant after closing, I reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. The money that had once represented my thwarted dreams had ultimately facilitated their fulfillment just by a different path than I had originally envisioned. The family that had taken me for granted now saw me more clearly, respecting both my career choice and my personal boundaries. And I had changed too, growing from someone who silently enabled unhealthy dynamics to a woman who could advocate for herself while still maintaining connections to those she loved. The pain of that family dinner had been necessary, a catalyst for growth that might never have happened otherwise. I sometimes wonder what Dad would think of where we all ended up. Would he be proud of the restaurant I built with the same dedication he had put into our family home? Would he approve of how I had stood up for myself while still finding a way back to family harmony? I like to think he would, that he would see in my journey an echo of his own values of hard work, fairness, and creating something that lasts. Life is rarely about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, though sometimes those are necessary. More often, it's about the quiet courage to value yourself when others don't, to set boundaries that protect your dreams, and to recognize that true family supports each other's authenticity rather than imposing arbitrary standards of success. I still have the folder labeled "House" tucked away in my office safe. I keep it not as a reminder of betrayal, but as evidence of my own strength and capacity for sacrifice. It reminds me that I am capable of extraordinary generosity, but also that such generosity should be given wisely and with clear expectations. The journey from unappreciated supporter to respected business owner wasn't easy or straightforward. There were tears, confrontations, and difficult conversations along the way. But standing in my own restaurant, hearing the satisfied murmurs of customers enjoying food I had conceptualized, seeing staff who respected my leadership, I know it was worth every painful step. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for your worth in a relationship or family situation? How did you balance self-respect with maintaining connections to those you love? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful transformations. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey of self-discovery and growth.